Have you ever felt like that freaking Greg, that jerk, like he keeps doing videos on Chris, like how dare you? Was it mostly insulting to you or? Coach Greg, and I'm here with special guest, Mr. Olympia bound and Arnold Schwarzenegger bound competitor, Iain Valliere.
What's up? How's it going, Greg? Thanks for having me.
Great to talk to you again. Some of you may or may not know, I used to coach Iain back in the day, and since he's progressed, he's now Canada's best bodybuilder.
Yep. Thanks, man. Yeah, no, it's pretty cool to, have that accolade, I guess. There's obviously no official Canadian rankings, but I think if you're going to, put one out there, I definitely think I'd be in the mix for it. So it's been a long road, but I'm glad it's coming full circle, right?
Absolutely. And looking back, is there a time when you thought, wait a minute, I can make a career out of this? Because we all start, we lift weights and we think, I'm pretty good at this. Is there some special show, a weight that you got to or a time that you can remember where you thought, I'm going to be an Olympia competitor one day?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say because it's such a progression, like it's over so many years, but, and it's also been an evolution, like as social media has come more to the forefront in bodybuilding, the opportunities to make careers like, with YouTube and having sponsorships that, will pay you good salaries because of your social media influence have been a lot better, so the opportunities are there. So, obviously when I came into bodybuilding, the goal was, to make a career of it and all these kind of things. But back then it was like 10 guys with weeder contracts and like, it wasn't really a thing like it is now, like Instagram really didn't even exist. When I was working with you, it was a year old, not even, so, things have changed a lot. So, I think probably when I won my first pro show, or probably when I did my first Olympia. I think when I did my first Olympia and stood up there with the best guys in the world, then I was like, okay, this is something I can do at the highest level. Winning a pro show is one thing, but I also know that the show I'd won was kind of like a low tier show. So I was like, okay, when I get to the actual Olympia and step on stage with the best of the best, this will really be, the telling tale sign if I have, what it takes to continue to progress up the ranks, make a real career, have some significant influence in this industry. So I'd say, that 2018 first Olympia was when I was like, okay, this is my time to like go full in, let's really make a gun for the top here.
It's interesting because looking back, I'm thinking, I remember when you first hired me, you sent me your photo and I'm looking at you and I'm like, yeah, he's really good. He's got some potential. And then I'm getting some check-ins and I think it was about 6 weeks out. Maybe you were 22 years old or so. And I'm like, what am I even looking at? Like, I'm like, he's 6 weeks out. He's already going to win overall. And already I was like, this guy is going somewhere. This guy, with or without me, he has just that natural genetic ability to be amazing. So I'm surprised you said 2018, once you won a show, like at a high level, that it took before you felt that confidence. Like, because for me, I'm like, man, this dude is unreal.
I mean, I knew I had the potential to be a good bodybuilder, and I knew that I could be, be a bodybuilder and, have a career in bodybuilding, but making the, bulk of my income through probably coaching or, things like this that weren't direct from bodybuilding. I think when it was that 2018 first Olympia was when I was like, okay, this is when I can be a real full-time 100% bodybuilder, So obviously there was times before that, even, when we did that Ottawa show in 2013, I saw how I looked here. I'm like, I'm going to fucking destroy some guys, in the amateur ranks. I knew at that point I was very, very good for an amateur. And, even going into my first couple of pro shows, like I never really placed outside of top 5, top 6, right? So I knew I had potential to be good, but the difference between being good and being elite or being someone that makes your entire living from bodybuilding is a big leap. And, it's been something that I've been working towards. I think 2018 till today has been that biggest jump in that direction.
And switching the topics a little bit, back in the day when I was coaching you, you weren't eating all just chicken, broccoli, and rice. Is there any special meal that I used to have on your plan that you used to actually like? Because, today's bodybuilder usually eat chicken, broccoli, and rice. Was there anything that you like to eat that maybe was out of the ordinary for a bodybuilder at that time?
Yeah, I mean, the entire plan I ate from you, I mean, anyone that goes and looks at those pictures, like I look crazy at that show. And I think almost every meal, I would eat maybe one plain, normal, like chicken and ricey kind of meal. But even then I was eating so much greens, like I was never, but I remember there was the one meal I had that was like a pre-workout meal I would always have. That was the P28 peanut butter PB2 sandwich with the banana and the popcorn. And I would have that pre-workout. And that was like the best part of my day every day, looking forward to that meal. Every day I just want to train because like, I just want to eat the meal. I didn't really care about the fucking training. I just want to eat that. So I remember that one. But even now, like as much as I can be a straight chicken and rice guy in some capacities. I'm also not like, even with Chris, like I might write Chris a program, and write egg whites, this, but then I also give, guys like Chris or myself or Melissa the kind of creative liberty to make whatever they like out of that. Right. So I'm all for people, if you have egg whites and protein and you have these things, or they fit into your program and you want to make some pancake or you want to make some protein ice cream, I think that's fucking great. Do what tastes good and what's going to keep you satiated and enjoying your diet to some bit. Cause I mean, especially when you're really pushing the envelope to get that condition down, like it can be pretty fucking miserable, so to have some foods that you enjoy and look forward to your diet can make the process a lot more enjoyable, right?
Yeah, I did notice that. For example, Chris, I saw in his last video, he was eating protein pancakes and then protein ice cream. And I'm like, hey man, that sounds a lot like what I eat. And I've done a lot of videos on Chris in the past, and a lot of people are like, Greg, you're not his coach, and he looks way better than you, obviously. And he has a coach, which is you, which is amazing to think that, two guys from the same area and they coach and the whole story. It's amazing. But have you ever felt like that freaking Greg, that jerk, like he keeps doing videos on Chris, like how dare you? Was it mostly insulting to you or kind of like a compliment that I pick him out so often? Like, what do you feel about that?
No, I mean, I understand. I understand that Chris is, at the forefront of this industry right now. And I mean, especially when someone like that is putting their diet out there and, you do, from the competitive bodybuilding standpoint, a less than typical diet, most people would say. But no one that does it can argue that it works. I mean, I've done it, and you can see even Chris now being, a two-time Olympia champion is incorporating things like that work into his plan. So it's not annoying by any stretch. I mean, I understand that, it's good from the perspective that I think it gets people to think about, okay, I don't need to eat this stuff all the time to be good. Plain boring food. And, the proof is in the pudding because even Chris doesn't all the time, right? Like, and I don't all the time. I mean, even my last meal last night was, whey and natural peanut butter, and I blended it up with some ice and did it in a like an ice cream, So there's definitely, ways to do these things working with the foods that are in your diet. So no, I don't find it annoying at all. I think what you're doing is great, and it's getting people, to incorporate these foods that they will be able to follow and be more diligent with instead of trying to stick to chicken rice diets. And then they get a weekend and they're like, fuck this, I don't want to eat this crap,
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy to hear that. It's not just about eating the perfect diet. It's about eating the diet that you can follow. And a great memory I have is when you won your pro card, we got on the phone and somebody was going to be, I forget which magazine, but they wanted to know your diet. And you're like, can I say I eat like peanut butter and banana sandwiches? Like, what do I have to say here? I'm like, to tell them exactly what you eat. It was hilarious because it was so non-typical, but a lot of people seem to think it has to be chicken, broccoli, and rice because it's been done for years and years and years. But why do you think that most people think it has to be chicken, broccoli, and rice? And when I say chicken, broccoli, and rice, it doesn't have to be broccoli, be asparagus, but
a generalization.
Yeah.
I think most of that comes from, look, there's no debating that if you have the willpower, it works. If you want to eat plain, boring food and you can adhere to that, like, I know I absolutely can, or someone like Chris could, or you absolutely could, I'm sure. If you get an elite bodybuilder, that's very driven with good willpower, with the want to be the best, can they follow those? 100%. Is it necessarily the easiest way for the vast majority or everyone to do it? No. And I think why it's become so popularized is probably from the first generation of bodybuilders that really got into the DVD world, the YouTube world. You go back and watch the Ronnie Coleman, the Jay Cutler videos, the Flex Wheeler videos. All they ate was just like boiled fucking chicken and, like plain white fish. And people thought like, well, the 90s guys were the conditioned guys. If you want to be in shape, you got to eat boring ass food. Which is obviously not a reality. I mean, even these guys, if you look back to, they'd be 12 weeks out drinking distilled water and doing no sodium. So there's clearly a lot of, misinformation and things that we've learned and progressed on as bodybuilders, and not even as just bodybuilders, it's just, athletes or people just trying to lose weight, right? So there's been a lot of advancements in these things. And, like we just said there, I mean, there's also, I think as people like yourself and, people see guys like Chris eating protein pancakes, I think as people understand, like, okay, these foods can still be incorporated just into a different manner, like, okay, my diet says whey protein and oats and this, but hey, maybe we can, get like, something like your cookbook and you learn different ways to utilize those foods to make something that I enjoy a little more, So I think there's a million ways to skin a cat. And I think, like you said, the best way is obviously what you can adhere to the most. And, I get these questions on my Q&As all the time of people being like, what's the best split or what's the best diet? I'm like, which one can you follow? You know, can you follow a push-pull legs, or can you follow an individual part and give it 120%? Can you do 2 sets to maximal failure, or do you know that you're not going to push that hard? Maybe a little higher volume is better for you. And same goes with the diet. It's like, I can say that the best way is to eat clean food, 1000% chicken, rice, but if you're not going to follow that, it's useless, you know? So, I think there's a happy balance, and you also need to know yourself and what you can adhere to, right?
Exactly. It goes to show it's what you can do over the long period of time. And the best diet isn't necessarily the one that's the best. It's the one that you can follow. Because if you do a perfect diet Monday to Friday and then you have to cheat on the weekend to make up for it, well, what good is it?
Well, and a perfect example is what I'll usually do is, as I start my prep at the beginning of the year, I'm pretty anal. So I'll keep it like to the very basic bodybuilding foods in the very basic capacity. Like, I don't not enjoy eating, and I season my food nicely and I use condiments and like these things. So I try and make them taste good. But like, say, for example, now I've been dieting since January, February, right? And I'm going to be going all the way till October. So as now I'm 5, 6, 7 months into my plan, I'm like, okay, maybe I want some protein ice cream. Maybe I want protein pancakes instead of just egg whites and oats, right? So, as I get a little farther in, then these are when I incorporate those kind of things. So I'm like, okay, I'm a little tired of this, but I'm going to use these same foods in a different methodology or, in a different capacity and just switch things up, but using the same foods that are in my diet. So that's kind of how I go. I just go through the same meal plan, just through kind of different cycles of how I'm incorporating the foods, right?
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, you diet for so long. I don't know how you can do it, having to prep. You've already won 2 shows. You have another show coming up, and then 2 weeks later, the Olympia. Like, How is it that you can balance your off-season eating to your pre-contest eating and still have energy? You're talking right now, you have tons of energy. You're in the gym training hard. You're not losing muscle. How is it that you're able to just keep this going?
I think a lot of it comes down to, well, one, I think the biggest thing for me has been strategically done off season. So, when I've done proper off seasons, and not trying to blow up a bajillion pounds and like stayed in a bit better condition, kept my appetite a little higher, my cardio a little better, my energy levels a little better. But you also have to think, for me, I honestly feel better the farther I get into prep, because for me being 275, 280, 290 pounds in the off season, even if I'm keeping it like right above maintenance, that's a lot of food that can really slug you down in terms of like, the amount of carbs I have to ingest, and that can really bring my energy levels down. So as I get into prep more and the food comes down a bit, I'm not like serotonin down from 1,000,000 grams of carbs. So I actually feel a lot better energy wise as I get a little less food in me. So I'm kind of in that spot now where I'm not like pushed so low where I feel terrible, but I'm not so high that I feel terrible, But like I was saying at the beginning, I think a lot of it comes down to properly done off seasons, when you can make your off season so that your body's optimized and acclimate to using these foods effectively. It's just going to make the rest of the year so much easier for you. Like I've never had any point this year where I had to push 3 hours of cardio because I stayed in pretty good shape in the off season. And a lot of things that I did thinking preemptively to make the rest of the season easier on myself, right?
Well, what's interesting from that is that it sounds like you're not really into the whole bulking, like eat big to get big. But I mean, you're 270 plus pounds, so obviously you're big. But like body fat wise, what's your highest off-season body fat? Because I keep saying, you should be at a healthy weight in the off-season, and you compete probably around 4% body fat, somewhere around there. So obviously you're not going to maintain 4% year-round. So you have to bulk up. You're a competitor. You can't remain shredded year-round. But at your biggest, bulked up, how fat, if we're going to call it that, would you get?
I mean, I don't have Greg laser eyes, but I mean, I think I never cannot see like decent abs. I always have quad separation. I always have good abs. I want to make sure that I can always see muscularity so that no one would be like, are you a power lifter? It's like, no, I'm a bodybuilder. I want to look like what I do. And I think there's times for everything, but I don't think there's any time where being fat is ever conducive. And I think anyone that's been there will realize very quickly that it's just not necessary. And like I was saying at the beginning, I mean, like I've done it every single way. I mean, I've, blown up 50 pounds in off seasons, and, maybe it was all leading me to where I am now. But all I noticed was that when it came to be my first show of the year, it was a pain in the fucking ass. I'm starting this, I'm heavy as shit. My cardio sucks. I'm trying to get on the fucking like bike. I'm doing like recumbent biking, barely, 20 minutes, I'm like dying, So, I mean, things like this, and it's just, the opportunity to preserve muscle and keep your training intensity high becomes a lot more difficult when you're trying to really push down, like to get that much weight off. And, if you're doing 2 hours of cardio and eating minimal food to try and get off an extra 30 pounds of fluff that you gain in the off season, I can absolutely tell you're not going to be training like I train, and that's for me where I am in my career. Optimizing my training is everything. So that's all that matters to me at this point, is making sure that the amount of food that I intake and everything is making it so that I can train as hard and as intensely as I possibly can. Because that's obviously, at this point where I think it's rendering the most change to my stage look, is really that real hard training, versus pushing the food up like crazy. Like this last off season, I was 5 to 6 pounds lighter than I was the previous off season. But I ended up being 7 to 8 to 10 pounds heavier on stage this year. So it's like, technically you're talking about a 15-pound gross difference, but I still ended up being heavier, So, it's not necessarily heavier is better. And especially if you're someone like with a crazy fast metabolism, like I understand you're gonna have to push the food, but if you're pushing that much that you're gaining body fat, you're just eating the wrong foods probably,
So for you in your off season compared to say show shape, how much weight do you have to lose? Because a lot of people, they don't really know bulk, cut, like how much should I gain? So for example, what percent body fat would you say is a good level to maintain in your off season? You're a bodybuilder, you're coaching people. Is 20% kind of a limit, 15, 30? Where's the limit?
No,
and how much do you cut in the off season?
I would never want to get more than 15 in my opinion. I mean, especially for me at my level, or to anyone. I mean, if you're getting much more than 15, you're probably starting to, your insulin sensitivity is probably starting to go a little, your performance isn't going to be as good. I mean, I find a lot of process, my sleep gets worse that, when I get that kind of heavy. So, I'll go from, maybe 12 to 14% fat, at most down to like my 4 or 5 or whatever it is, So I go from, this off season, the heaviest I got was like 287, 290. And then I competed in my first show at 263. So, I mean, percentage wise, that's only like less than 30 pounds, right? So, I mean, it's not a dramatic difference for someone my size.
It's amazing to hear because honestly, people use you as a reason to bulk. They'll say, well, Greg, Iain doesn't believe in what you're saying. And here I'm thinking, you're actually more strict than me. I tell people somewhere between 10 and 20% is somewhere to maintain in the off season, depending on the person. And if you're single digit body fat, probably going to be hard to build muscle. So it's not that I'm against bulking. I'm against bulking when you've already bulked. You're already fat. Why are you force feeding? You're already 20%, don't need it.
Exactly. And that's where I agree with you there. I mean, there's a level in the middle because you obviously need to get the food high enough that you're in some kind of a surplus of some sort or just above maintenance in some capacity. And also giving yourself enough food that you can fuel whatever level of training you're doing. Especially, you have to take into consideration if you're someone that's doing Jay Cutler level volumes of training, you have to incorporate that to what you're eating. If you train lower volume like I train, okay, well then, I maybe don't need to eat as much because my expenditure is not as high. So, there's obviously a happy medium there. And I've definitely found, staying a little on the leaner side, but, giving myself a little bit of body fat and a little bit of water to, make my joints and everything feel good. And, obviously weight moves weight. I mean, you've been a power lifter, you're stronger at 205 than you are at 165. I mean, to some extent, obviously having some weight on there to be strong is conducive. But like you said, any more than that, it's just fat, and fat isn't muscle, it doesn't do anything beneficial. If anything, like I said, it's just going to, ruin your insulin sensitivity and a bunch of hormonal process and all these things that are just going to be negative to your gains, not positive in any capacity, right? So you need to find where you're getting enough food, but not too much that it's just excess body fat that's just going to be useless and make it a pain in the ass to get off, right?
Right. So it sounds like overall the advice is you should look like a bodybuilder in your off season. If you're shredded year round, then yeah, eat more, get up to a point where you're feeling healthy, you can train hard, and that you still look like a bodybuilder. But any extra fat, it's not beneficial because then you have to resort to the 2-3 hours cardio or drastic calorie deficits, and you're going to feel like garbage. So interesting, you've bulked up in the past, you've done less bulking, you found that when you don't eat as much and didn't gain as much body fat in the off season, you actually built on more muscle. Now, you've had several different coaches, including me. What difference do you notice between all the coaches? Is there a big, huge difference between my coaching and other coaching? Is there something that jumps out? Do you learn from every coach? Do you think that if you change coaches, does that mean your coach is no good? Because I know for me, there's only so much I can explain to someone. Like in the first year of coaching, what else could I teach you? I would say it's smart to actually go from one coach to the next because you can keep learning and incorporating what they're saying into your own training, making you a better coach yourself.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I've learned things from every single coach I've worked with, yourself included, to Dennis James, to Matt, and now to Patrick. So, I mean, I've worked with 4 coaches, over my like real bodybuilding career, and I've learned a ton from all of them, and, at the end of the day, I think, there is obviously small differences and, like your food was obviously different, and things like this. But I think at the end of the day, it's not drastically different in terms of what people are, trying to accomplish. I think anyone that's smart in coaching, wants to obviously optimize training. They want to maintain a lean composition, and they want to get you as in good shape as possible come stage time. So, there's people that are going to do, utilize different foods and things like this. But, at the end of the day, it's all going to come down to what, like we've talked about, what you can follow the best, and for me, following anything is not an issue. But for a lot of people it is. So, finding someone that, you mesh with well, personality wise, that program makes sense for you and your lifestyle and that you can have a good level of communication, and someone that you also feel like you're learning from, I think that's important as well, especially for me being a coach. I want to feel like I'm learning, I'm always eager to be learning something new, and that's really the biggest thing for me, right?
I think that's great tips. You got to have the same kind of philosophy. Like you got to agree what they're doing. If they say, hey, I want you to fast every day for 16 hours, and you're like, well, I just don't want to do that. Well, why are you doing it? But at the same time, you should feel like you're learning something. And if you're not, then, well, why not get a different coach? If you already know what that coach is saying, then why not try somebody else and see what you can add? Because we're always learning. I mean, I'm 45. There isn't a day goes by that I don't learn something new.
I think one important thing there too is, when you said like, if they're saying doing 16-hour fast, you don't agree with it, blah, blah, blah. I mean, what's going to end up happening then is you're just not going to follow it. People end up then texting 10 of their buddies or asking someone on Instagram, hey, my coach says this, should I do this? And then the guy on Instagram is going to say, no, you shouldn't be doing that. And then they're just still going to have their coach and they're listening to 10% of what their coach says and something other guy from Instagram. And then they're going to follow something they read on Google. And you're going to get this hodgepodge of, little bits of information, but things need to gel. They need to gel as a program altogether. And having your coach, have all the information of what you're doing. At that point, I would just be upfront, be like, hey, I'm not following what you're doing. This is what I'm doing. Let's try and work together and make something work, And if at that point they're like, well, I don't want to work with you or I can't do this. Okay, then maybe it's time to move on. But I think open lines of communication are only going to make you a better bodybuilder. And the clients that I've worked with that are just 100% dead honest are always the ones that are more successful. They're like, hey man, I fucked up. I cheated on my diet last night. Or, hey, I'm going to go eat out with my girlfriend tomorrow. Is that okay? Instead of just doing it and not telling me, or people that are like, hey, I've been taking an extra 200 milligrams of Winstrol, whatever it is, we're all going to get these guys, or girls or whatever it is. And I think that just open lines of communication where you can have, that good trust and making sure everything's out in the open always leads to a better competitor or someone, trying to achieve their weight goals or whatever it is.
Absolutely. And well said. You mean you have to have trust with your coach and you have to be able to tell them what you're doing, because if not, how does the coach know what to do?
Oh, well, I mean, and we've all had it too. I mean, where you get a client and they're like, I can't lose weight, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, well, you're looking at your program, you're like, there's no way mathematically, like there's no way you're not losing weight here, And then it goes to show, you're like, ask them, okay, write down everything you eat and drink in a day. And it's like, okay, then they're drinking like a Coke here. They're using crazy condiments with insane calories in them. They're, not actually eating one meal. They're doing this here. Like, there's so many little things that when you compile over a week, 2 weeks, a month, 3 months, that some people don't really think about, can make a big difference. So having that open line of communication, making sure everything's out in the open, being like, hey, is it okay if I do this, if I use this? And making sure everyone's on the same page information-wise makes such a big difference, right?
And it's funny with coaching, because I'm brutally honest, and I've said to people, look, you're just lying to me. I don't care what you say. Yeah. You're not eating 1,200 calories and doing 4 hours of cardio a day and not losing weight. Literally a true example. And I'm like, if you are, eat 800 calories and do 6 hours cardio. And if they just copy and paste what I say, he told me to eat 800 calories in 6 hours. You getting so much shit, but meanwhile, they don't know the context of it. I'm like, I'm calling them out on the bullshit. They're not telling me the truth. And just like Dr. House would say on that TV show, everybody lies. If there's no way that's possible, then they're just straight out lying, or they don't even know what they're doing. Maybe they're sleep eating.
I think a lot of reason people do this is because they want you to give them an answer that's easier. So they don't want the work of like eating less food or doing more cardio. They want you to give them some magical answer that doesn't necessarily exist. So like when they're like, oh, I'm not losing weight doing exactly what I'm doing, which isn't what you told me, because that's comfortable for me. So then they want you to change something on your end other than the food or the training, or they just want you to give them more drugs or, give them some fancy, like protocol or some fancy cardio regime that's not harder, like, or eat some special food or drink some tea or whatever it is that's going to make it easier for them, or they want your sympathy. It's one or the other. It's generally never because they're actually following the plan,
Oh yeah, it makes me laugh. Oh, I'm not doing any empty stomach cardio. My friend is, so that's probably why I'm not losing weight. I'm like, at the end of the day, it's calories in, calories out. You can't just say we'll do empty stomach cardio versus fed cardio and you're suddenly going to drop the 4 pounds you gained this week. It's just nonsense.
Yep, no, I agree 100%.
Next time on Coach Greg.
Well, I mean, the judges that were sitting 10 feet in front of me agreed. They must have the good G8 or IGF. They got the Increlix. That's what it is. I don't have that. They got that. That's why they're better than me.
People don't believe it, but what is your off-season kind of maintenance phase like? What has prevented you from dabbing into powerlifting?
Getting paid? I don't know.